Europeization, Moldova has always been part of the European continent. We know that everybody who is recruited by the Brussels bureaucracy can know no geography. And probably the Moldovans now will have to think that they have never been Europe, but they have always been. They cannot become even more European. But if they are talking about economy, then the EU should think about themselves first. According to the opinion poll, more than 40% of residents of the Republic see Russia as an important partner in economy and in security as well. The EU seen as such only by 29% respondents. And all of this takes place amid total wipeout of the media space, where there are only pro-Western media. And this pro-Western media receive huge money. They could probably make the Moldovan economy to reach a new level using this money. But Sandu won't be able to rewrite the people of Moldova into another category. We have always been friends, and we will always continue doing so. It's temporary, it's harmful, and it's anti-national what Sandu does. Thank you very much. Is Izvestia with us? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. Katerina Pozharskaya, Izvestia. We have one question. Last week, the Parliament of Latvia endorsed a bill. The country withdraws from the Ottawa Treaty to prohibit anti-personnel mines. What the relevant initiatives of the European countries can testify to. According to the information that we have, the recent joint statements of the Baltic states and Poland about the withdrawal from the convention to ban the use, production of anti-personnel mine, the so-called Ottawa Convention, is aimed at development of interaction with producers from the USA. All of this is done for the interests of NATO. The place to organize of mass production of such armaments is the Baltic states and Poland. The money will be given through the EU, including the program Rearm Europe. The technical support will be ensured by the US. They plan to use the mine fields in the eastern wing of NATO and for the Ukrainian forces. They want the escalation on the European continent. They rewrite history and purpose so that no one from the current generation remembers what such ventures ended with in the past. The security of Europe cannot be built on the ruins of common sense. And landmine fields won't facilitate peace and cooperation. This fraught with harmful consequences for security on the European continent. They show their true selves as provocators. Thank you. Thanks to you. Is Balt News with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. I'm sorry, I have some technical issues, but I can hear and see you very well. Please ask your question. Just a second. Madam Zakharova, the Parliament of Lithuania prolonged until May 2026 national sanctions against Russians and Belarus people. The law now has one more provision providing for the permanent residency given to the citizen of Russia in Lithuania will be revoked if they establish that they went to Russia and Belarus more than once in the last 3 months. What can you say about it? Segregation on the nationality is a norm for them, not only in political life and social life, but it's their policy. They support Russophobia, and Vilnius imposes more limitations to the Russian-speaking population. Russia will strive for the condemnation of this practice, including at the relevant international platforms. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Is Xinhua with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have the following question for you. On April the 20th, marked the Day of the Chinese Language all over the world. In Russia hosted in many places dedicated events featuring traditional Chinese culture like calligraphy or wushu. The public welcomed it with enthusiasm. Recently, more and more people in Russia is interested in the Chinese language and culture. What do you think about it? What do you think about the role that the education in Chinese plays in development of relations between our countries? You know, special place in Russia-China humanitarian cooperation is occupied by education, in particular learning Russian and Chinese. One of the first, as you know, exchange years, thematic international projects, and it's become a good tradition, was dedicated to national languages in 2009. We had the year of the Chinese language in Russia, and 2010 was the year of the year of the Chinese in Russia. We encourage mutual education in Russian and Chinese. This track is an important component of bilateral relation and plays an important role in strengthening confidence and friendship. As you said, the interest in Russia to the Chinese culture, literature is at a high level. More young people in China are interested in Russian. Now our countries play a leading role to preserve the world's stability, security, to preserve traditional values, the values of civilizations, to preserve historical memory. Our comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction prompts growing demand in personnel who knows Russian and Chinese. Specialists should ensure deeper cooperation between our countries. Young people who choose Russian and Chinese languages has a lot of prospects in future and possibilities for their careers. There's relevant work to create favorable conditions for cooperation between universities, academic mobility, exchange of experience in education. In China, there's 29 joint educational facilities at Chinese universities. There's more than 100 educational programs where Russia participates. Russia-China Joint University in Shenzhen works. We share our position that it is important to preserve the national languages, and I'm sure that such days as the Day of the Chinese language and the Day of the Russian language that is going to be celebrated very soon on June 6th reminds about the importance of multi-language and cultural diversity. Our languages is not only part of our rich history and culture, national history and culture, but they are also official languages of the UN. That's why she speaks Chinese.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is the Reuters agency with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Reuters is with you. We have two questions today related to Ukraine. Last Friday, the Bloomberg agency and this week another agency reported that the U.S. proposed to their allies within the peaceful resolution of the Ukrainian conflict actual recognition of Russian control over Crimea and 4 territories that have entered Russia, the non-entrance of Ukraine into NATO and the alleviation of sanctions against Russia, and also sort of a alleviation when it comes to the demands of Moscow. Is Moscow ready to also take a step forward to reach these agreements? And if yes, then what will those conditions be? Of course, we could take a look at the history of this issue, but perhaps it shouldn't be me who voices these points, but let me recall that Sergei Lavrov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, just last week gave an interview to the Kommersant newspaper where he gave a detailed description to this issue. And it's almost a year ago, in this very hall, the President of the Russian Federation voiced not just the Russian negotiations position, but Russia's basic approach to the situation around Ukraine and the security on the continent. And this would take a lot of time, so I would once again provide links in the text version of today's briefing, and I would like to recall that all of our approaches have been voiced by the President, by the Minister of Foreign Affairs in detail, and are reaffirmed constantly. So I believe that we should focus on today's reality in the way that the plans that have been presented at the mass media as leaks, as references to negotiations with diplomats, all of it as a complex. Leaks or plans have been rejected by Zelensky. So why should we once again draw up some hypothetical scenarios when a person who is out of his mind, if we can refer to him as a person, you know, how, according to Bulgakov, dog's heart is, he does not consent to it. He said that Kiev legally will not recognize the Russian status of Crimea. I don't even want to quote him on this. I just like to draw the logical conclusion that he once again showcased lack of political will for peace, lack of desire to make any compromise when it comes to settling conflict, and we should call it by its own name. He fully showcased inability to not just show any care, but empathy for his own citizens of Ukraine. I believe that is the main result of when we're addressing the current situation. He has no care for what happens to them. The only thing he cares about is his own political ambitions. Because if anyone says that, no, he is not just thinking about his political ambitions, but about the political future of Ukraine. But this is exactly the moment when this future of Ukraine could be formed, could be guaranteed, could be secured. But that is not what he seeks. People are nothing but material for him that he can use. His only interest is preserving his authority, his own sick ambitions, considering his abnormal state and everything that comes out of it. Once again, you've cited 2 or 3 sources. Unfortunately, these sources amount to hundreds, so it's useless to comment on them. Dialogue with the US side continues, as you've probably seen already. It's not simple. But at this stage, our countries aim to find long-term solutions. Both our leadership has affirmed this, and we receive similar signals from the other side. And once again, if you want to know about the status or the compromise, I will once again refer you to the statement of the Russian president on June 14th, 2024, and underscore that this is not just a request, it's our basic position on the issue. I'd like to recall that the residents of the region that you've just mentioned have fully implemented the right on self-determination of the peoples. So we should just operate on the realities, base it on the international law, on the situation on the ground. How many years were we presented that everything should be decided, and it will be decided? These are the facts. I believe that this is what the basis should be for our actions. And the second question, if you allow. As for the elimination of threats and the root causes of the conflicts, once again, I would like to underscore, I will not go back to it. It has already been voiced out by the minister, Sergei Lavrov, in his interview to the Kommersant newspaper, but on mass scale, we repeat it constantly, but once again, it was done to this news agency. And the second question, once again, has to do with Ukraine. Russia continuously speaks against Ukraine's membership in NATO, citing it as one of the root causes of the conflict. One is Moscow's position right now about Ukraine's membership in the European Union. Why are you so concerned about membership? Perhaps you should think about just the member, whether it is a potential or current one. I mean, Ukraine is not in its best state. Where does this thriving come from? Just take a look at what's happening in Ukraine. And secondly, I think that the West is the guarantor of preserving the well-being of Ukraine. These are the statements that were given. These promises, public promises, were made. The collective West should answer to the Ukrainian people what exactly they've pulled Ukraine into, what exactly it has turned into. The guarantees were given that Ukraine will be a prosperous country. Perhaps they should answer these questions for the Ukrainians. But it's another important point when you speak of the European Union. They don't even hide the fact that they've changed, and it came with the change in their name. Although we could suppose that there was a certain political component in it when the European Economic Union just turned into European Union by taking economy out of the name and out of the list of their priorities. Just take a look at what the European Union is doing. First of all, they're dealing with politics. The economics have been pushed aside. It not only longer serves the politics, it's being targeted, it's being bribed. And what remains of the economic component? It's the economic component that doesn't deal with minimizing the damages of the European Union, but it has to do with gathering financial support for the very same Kiev regime in order to, once again, if we go back to the politics as the dominant area for the European Union, to once again influence the situation in the region, on the continent, and so on. More and more in recent years, even until 2022, the EU and it's trying to turn into one of the NATO departments, and now we see it in practice as well when the NATO is using the EU as a wallet, as a chance to use financial flows under the guise of so-called assistance just to mobilize the economies of the EU member states in order to serve the aggressive policy and the aggressive ideology of NATO. So we draw subsequent conclusions out of that as well. If that is all, is the Chinese Media Corporation with us? Yes, good afternoon. Madam Zahara, we have one question. According to the latest public poll, shows that the negative approach of the US towards China for the first time has gone down in 5 years, which could deal with the change of number of users on the Chinese social media, as well as streamings of American online stars. They show that the tax policy of the U.S. president will not harm the interests of the U.S. What is your opinion? Is the tax policy thus reduced to nothing? You see, in this case, I would like not to base my answer on the economical figures, but on the informational issue. The xenophobia, you see, there is the lowered negative attitude towards China from the US. That is what xenophobia really is, which is now changing for the better. It's now becoming less aggressive. And the Americans are less engaged in their negative approach towards China. But you should remember that those weren't natural processes when you could suppose it had to do with a negative role of China towards the US, which wasn't the case. Historical phobias or the impossibility to resolve any issues that came from the past or arose in the present. No, this xenophobia was created. It was slowly formed, just like Russophobia and just like their attitude towards other countries. If you think that towards their allies, the US allies are not able to form these phobias, you're wrong. I've provided several examples and I will do it once again. Whereas France, exerting their independent foreign policy, refused to join the US track of occupying Iraq, denouncing its authorities and destroying its statehood. France was referred to as a scarecrow. It was appointed as a scarecrow by the US. And then they waged the full information war against France and the French people. It was disgusting and terrible when, during the American talk shows, they should change the name of the French fries. Because in the US, they use such a word, French fries. And it wasn't just a joke. They had a real discussion that perhaps after everything that's been going on, because France dared simply to refuse to violate the international law, just stop using words that have to do with French, with French culture, French language, the issue of French films on the US territory. They mocked the French. You see, these are artificially created negative attitude of one or other nation, of a single country. I can still recall how disgustingly certain circles or elites behaved when it came to Kazakhstan. When on the US territory, they had a movie not just mocking, but belittling Kazakhstan and its culture, which truly was just an amalgamation of shameful, insane attitude to a number of nations under mottos using some memes, and nobody could do a single thing. It was just a wave of insanity. It was disgusting. Because all the cinemas in the US were plastered with such posters and nobody could do a single thing, because this was referred to as freedom of speech, freedom of self-expression. So these are all artificial things that appear to be well paid, well directed for certain purposes, either to create conditions for negotiations or to disrupt economical plans or projects, exert some kind of pressure. So first and foremost, we should remember that here we talk about shameful wave of information campaigns against people of different nations, of different ethnical groups, who are citizens of different countries, who unfortunately for the collective West, for them this is just normal behavior. Is the IRNA news agency with us?
Let me ask my question in English.
Sure.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told RT that Tehran is ready to expand trilateral discussions among Iran, Russia, and China to other issues, including non-nuclear ship issues. Could you explain the Russian Foreign Ministry's view on this proposal, please? Thanks.
Я напомню, что между Москвой и...
I would like to recall that between Moscow and Tehran, between Russia and Iran, we conduct constant coordination on a number of international issues of mutual interest. First of all, it has to do with cooperation with the UN, with many other organizations on international platforms, including BRICS and SCO. We regularly agree on our approaches on regional issues, projects of cooperation, prospective areas of mutual efforts of Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran in order to effectively form a secure infrastructure of multipolar world to preserve international global development and overcome relevant challenges that the world is facing. We operate based on the interest of our three countries in slow amalgamation of and holding of consultations that are continuing on different levels between the capitals, between the relevant forums, where Russia, China, and Iran are participating. If that is all, then the next question is the news front with us. Yes. Good afternoon. We only have one question. You've already referred to it, but about a single event. Recently, there was a massive event among the Japanese political leadership, including 70 members of parliament, and neighboring states reacted very negatively. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea has published strict commentary towards it. How could you comment on this event? You see, today we've already spoken about the Japanese militaries, and the Church of Yasukuni is the odious symbol of the Japanese militarism, where, among others, they're glorifying the war criminals of Class A who were sentenced to death after the ruling of the International Tribunal for the Far East. As far as we know, on April 21st, Prime Minister Siba and heads of both chambers of parliament and 2 members of the minister chambers have sent their address to the church, and we resolutely denounce these actions and this practice that in the year of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Second World War is ridiculous. We have repeatedly stated that Tokyo is hurting the feelings of the neighboring people who have fell victim to this barbarian expansionist campaign that was conducted by the Japanese authorities, and these actions demonstrate the true nature of the current course of Japanese authorities to conduct a speedy remilitarization. At the basis of it is their inability to claim responsibility for the aggression that they have instigated, and lack of sincere regret. We once again ask them to stop trying to rewrite pages of the human history and fully admit the end of the Second World War.
Is Moscow Post with us? Yes, good afternoon. We have one question today. There have been reports that Russia is working on the establishment of international financial settlement system based on the gold parity. How do Russian BRICS partners consider the possibility of establishing a single currency that will be insured by the gold? In the context of fragmentation of world economy, our key goal is to put in place conditions for sustainable development of economies of our countries. The new geopolitical reality dictates the need to elaborate effective measures and further steps in order to enhance financial and economic cooperation. You see, the de-dollarization, which is obviously getting a global trend right now, was declared by the U.S. administration under Biden. Not countries were abandoning dollar in their mutual settlements. It was Biden administration itself that cut off countries from the possibility to use dollar for financial transactions. It sounds absurd, and the current U.S. administration is pointing to this fact, but it was Biden administration that set the tone. I don't know if they try to consider the consequences, but they promoted de-dollarization and encouraged it themselves. I did carefully follow the statements by the Russian leadership on this topic. There have been statements during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and Russia never abandoned this instrument. But when we were simply cut off from it, when we were blocked, and it was done in an eager manner by the representatives of the U.S. Biden administration, then in order to live on, in order to conduct financial transactions, we had to turn to different mechanisms. So it was Biden and U.S. liberal elites who initiated it. So now we are working on it due to the lack of trust to the financial mechanisms established by Western countries. Judging by how Western countries themselves are applying these mechanisms, in this context, not only BRICS countries, but other countries as well, are seeking to establish reliable systems which would guarantee and protect them from the shocks that, in particular, were created by liberal Democrats in the U.S. The main focus is now on putting in place conditions for the wide application of national currencies in mutual financial settlements. It is not an easy task. The structural reform of a global financial system is not a problem that could be solved overnight. However, all countries of our union are willing to achieve practical results and are ready to enhance cooperation in this field. We need some pillars. We need a foundation in order to continue the normal life in a situation that was produced by the Biden administration. So we are working on creating a new financial transaction system. It was reflected in the Kazan Declaration that was adopted at the BRICS summit that took place in October 2024. That document lists a number of specific projects, including the cross-border payment initiative, establishment of clearing infrastructure and a reassurance company, as well as a new investment platform. These ideas aimed at creating favorable conditions for enhancing trade volumes and investments among the BRICS countries. We hope the work will be continued by the Brazilian chairship. Thank you. Is Newsroom here with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. My name is Mikhail Rosen. We have one question. According to media reports, Consul General of Russia in Gyumri, Mr. Igor Titov, visited the local office of the opposition bloc Mother Armenia. Is this information reliable, and is Russia ready to develop relations not only with the government but also with other political forces of Armenia? The meeting you are talking about is an inevitable part of daily work of leaders of our diplomatic missions. Russian diplomats engage with the entire range of political forces in the country in order to promote bilateral relations on different tracks. In the case you've mentioned, His Excellency Mr. Igor Titov, on the eve of celebrations of the great victory, invited heads of all political leader forces to participate in the reception that will take place in the Consulate General. They discussed the development of cultural ties between municipalities of this consular district with Russian partners. There is no internal political context, so everything is on the surface, and it corresponds with the goals of the diplomatic mission. Thank you. Is Greater Asia here with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have one question today. During the past week, there have been three high-ranking visits of three high-ranking delegations from the Middle East in Moscow. First, the Russian capital was visited by Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Mr. Abbas Araghchi, and he handed over a personal message by Ayatollah Khamenei. Then Emir of Qatar visited Moscow and met President Putin, and then Omani Sultan visited Moscow. Does it mean that Russia is a strategic partner of Iran, serves as a key strategic mediating dialogue between Washington and Tehran in the context of settlement the nuclear issue? Well, Russia is taking active measures and taking steps in order to prevent deterioration of the situation around the nuclear program of Iran. We've been consistent on this track. We categorically reject any attempts of certain countries to try to resolve the problems with the use of force, and we warn all those who are thinking of it to refrain from this step, which would deteriorate the situation in the entire region. We believe all reasonable neighbors of Iran, including the countries of the Persian Gulf, understand it just as them. We want to see that the escalation fueled by the West does not turn into a hot phase, but is mitigated by means of agreements which would take into account the legitimate rights and eliminate the concerns of all countries involved. There are regular discussions with Tehran. This topic is also present in our dialogue with many other countries, including Qatar and Oman that you've mentioned. The Russian side supports the efforts of Moscow to establish indirect dialogue between the negotiating teams of Iran and the U.S. Our bilateral relations with Iran and other international partners are not limited to one single goal, as you definitely understand. The agenda is much deeper. There have been negotiations in Moscow, as you know. They were covered in media reports, and there was a press conference. The relations based on multifaceted trade, economic, scientific, technical, cultural, humanitarian, and other cooperation projects that are being developed in a dynamic manner and meet national interests of both countries. Let me once again refer you to the press conference. Thank you so much. Is Zvezda here with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Zvezda TV channel. Unfortunately, there was another sad news. After an attack by Ukrainian armed forces on the 24th of April, our correspondent Nikita Goltin was killed. He was a young man. It was for an entire month that doctors tried to save his life, but unfortunately he passed away. How would you comment this ongoing hunting by the Kiev regime against Russian journalists? Well, first of all, we express deep condolences to the family and the relatives of the journalist. Today we received the news that in the military hospital, the journalist, the military correspondent of the Zvezda TV channel passed away. It was for over a month that doctors tried to save his life, but unfortunately the wounds, the injuries were too hard. Let me remind you that together with the cameraman Andrei Panov and the driver Alexander Vakelis, he was the fourth victim of the attacks with the use of US-produced HIMARS missiles. It was a targeted attack against a car with Russian journalists, and Ukrainians spent 2 costly missiles in this attack. This was a terrorist attack. It can't be defined in any other way. These inhuman, they knew full well whom they were targeting. They knew they were targeting journalists. Let me remind you, since the beginning of this year, as a result of targeted attacks, 5 journalists were killed: Alexander Martimyanov, Alexander Datchuk, Andrei Panov, Anna Prokofyeva, and today, right now, this day, it was Nikita Golden who passed away. Many journalists were wounded or injured: Maxim Romanenko, Mikhail Kiev, Svetlana Larina, Isabella Lieberman, Yuri Shomov, and Mikhail Skuratov, Dmitry Volkov. On the whole, the victims of terrorist attacks are counted in dozens. Just think of it. It's not statistics. It's not statistics of a decade. I'm talking about just the past months or several years. All these strategies are not a result of an incidental attack. They are the victims of targeted, deliberate attacks. The Ukrainian army is hunting journalists. They trace them and they use all the weapons at their disposal to do so. They do so not only on the front line, they do so amid peaceful cities. I think of Dugina, I think of Vladlen Tatarsky. And we'll now allow these crimes remain unpunished. As you know, our prosecutor's office tries to do everything possible in order to bring the perpetrators to justice, and we as an MFA will try to make sure that international bodies, international organizations qualify these terrorist attacks as such. I'm talking about the High Commissar, the UN bodies, and the OSCE bodies will raise these issues at all platforms and will raise awareness of the international community. In the context of the Day of Freedom of Press that will be celebrated on the 3rd of May, we'll raise this topic at the UN General Assembly that will take place starting from the 28th of April, and immediate perpetrators and those in the President's office in Kyiv who make such practice a daily routine should be aware that they will be brought to justice. Many would ask us, well, this wouldn't bring the children back to their mothers. Then why talk about it? Not only shall we talk about it, but we should present evidence at all international platforms, because we write their names down in history, and unless we speak about it, if just for a day, just for one single day, we reduce the speed of our work, that will be crossed out of history, and their names will be forgotten. But our diplomats continue their work, our missions to international organizations, our permanent representatives, our ambassadors, our diplomatic and consular workers will not make this happen. We present exhibitions, we disseminate reports, we do everything that we can to make sure that our journalists have the opportunity to participate personally in international conferences. Regularly do we speak about the history of our domestic journalism that is now fighting these information fakes, not only in theory, by providing conferences shall we debate about countering the lies and disinformation, but it should be done in a way that as our journalists do so, and information about their historic deeds, about their tragic and very hard work will be presented to the international community. We will do so using all possible ways at our disposal, and we will reflect it in the documents of international organizations. Thank you. Is Anna Dolu here with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Today we have two questions, if we may. How could you comment on statement by the Yemeni Houthi movement that due to the increasing number of attacks by the U.S., civilians are dying? While our assessments of the large-scale military operation launched by the U.S. against the Yemeni movement Ansar Allah are well known. They are formulated in the media press release following the phone conversation between Mr. Lavrov and Marco Rubio of the 15th of March. I'll reiterate, Russian side believes there should be an immediate stop of violence and all parties are involved to show restraint and refrain from any attacks which could deteriorate the situation, lead to escalation and expansion of military confrontation. We believe that long-term stabilization in this region of the world and lasting settlement of the protracted Yemeni crisis is possible through negotiations aimed at elaboration of compromise solutions with the due consideration for legitimate interests of all leading Yemeni political forces, including Ansar Allah movement. Now, as for the strikes of the U.S. armed forces against the oil terminal in Ras Issa, on the 18th of April, according to most recent reports, they claimed lives of more than 80 and injured over 230 people. We believe it was impermissible and unjustified. I'd like to refer to the statement by the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, of the 19th of April. He expressed his concern by the U.S. attacks against Ras Issa, which claimed multiple victims among civilians. He noted that 5 humanitarian workers were injured. He pointed to the fact that port infrastructure was strongly damaged, and he expressed concern that waters could be contaminated due to the oil leak. In coordination with our regional partners, including Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Iran, will continue our efforts in order to see speedy normalization of the situation in Yemen and around it.
Thank you very much. Question 2. It's about Iranian nuclear deal. Foreign Minister of Russia Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow is prepared to facilitate US and Iran to restore nuclear deal. How does Russia see its role in this process? What could it do in this direction? I already commented on it today. I said that a detailed commentary was given following negotiations during joint press conference. All links will be given in the text of the briefing of April the 9th. Among others, Russia is prepared to facilitate this issue on the basis of the agreed upon agreements. Good afternoon, author E. We have 2 questions. This Scandinavian countries, Finland, Denmark, Norway, are militarized at a record rate. They procure armaments. We are not asking why they are doing so, but I would like to ask what the Foreign Ministry does to eliminate the risks that we see in future. I commented this topic as well today in the context of NATO destructive efforts. I talked about Northern Europe a lot. Russia closely follow the military preparations of Europeans, including the countries of Northern Europe, as well as integration of Finland and Sweden into NATO. These processes were active long before the special military operation, and these countries joining NATO, they were only covered by the special military operation. Even before that, we said that they plan that they overlap their military plans and so on, and we draw relevant conclusions from that. The decision to join NATO in Helsinki and Stockholm was taken by the authorities of the countries full of Russophobe complexes, without comprehensive consultations with their own public, with the pressure from the outside. They don't criticize their own referenda because they don't hold any. This decision cannot be reasonable, and these actions of one's good neighbors. Russia will use everything we can to ensure our security and defense. Many decisions were declared, and they are consistently implemented. As to the diplomatic efforts in this direction, we doubt that military and political leadership of many Western countries to adequately understand the signals that we send about inadmissibility and danger to escalate situation in the Baltic and Arctic regions, because we hear, as I said on the example of President Stubb, an inconsistent narrative. He contradicts himself. To use diplomatic tools, it is important all the signals to be to be said and understood. But Helsinki, Copenhagen, and other capitals refused this. They want to strategically defeat Russia. And as to diplomatic signals, it is absolutely clear that those who have of the receivers only want aggression from Brussels and London, and they also receive signals from Washington. But now they falter. I don't know what to do. Probably it's temporary. Let's see what will happen in future. This means the loss of common sense and their own sovereignty. Until this paradigm changes, the prospects for diplomatic dialogue with northern European countries isn't impossible, but not because of us. We have always been prepared for the dialogue, but they have something wrong with the radars. Question 2. The representative of the Georgian party, Georgian Dream, said that Georgia, by 2030, will be fully prepared and will join the EU. How can you comment it? Or will this change relations between our countries? You know, the main point is everyone who aspires to join the EU by 2030 has something to join. Great Britain wouldn't withdraw from anything good. When there's something to benefit from, when there's potential, the British will be the first ones, but they were the first to withdraw from the EU, and it's clear why. Because the crisis within the EU is so clear, and their potential is almost depleted. No one wants to do anything with it, especially those who care about their national economies. Georgia and us have talked about it many times. Despite political differences and lack of diplomatic relations, we built bilateral ties in a mutually beneficial way. There's dialogue on this track. We want to intensify our cooperation and normalize the relation which reflects the interests of both Russian and Georgian peoples. We shall that in practice, both our aspiration and our goodwill, our wish. But those who see the EU and joining EU should care about not only mottos, but about figures and statistics. They should see if there's anything there. Thanks to you. Is Lantaru with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We would like to ask only one question. On April 21st, the New York Post, citing the sources in the White House, said that Ukraine can agree to Russia's conditions. What can Russia say about the Kiev regime? Debunked that. We shouldn't go back to this topic. The question is, both de jure or de facto, the Kiev regime is unable to negotiate. That is it. Let's continue. Is Vmeste a newspaper with us? Oh, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. On the territory of the EU, the information about Russia is terrible. There's no truth about Russia. And a powerful argument for Russia would be statistics about resettlement back to Russia, not only compatriots of Soviet Germans, but also Germans who were born there. And there are different figures, but can you give some kind of official statistics? This statistics from 2006 include 1.2 million people. Those are people from more than 50 countries, including Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Germany, the US. If we're talking about Germany, in the recent 5 years, in the last 5 years, 15,000 ethnic Germans moved to Russia. In 2024, within the program, more than 30,000 people came to Russia. 1.8 thousand people came from the EU. As to repatriates, those are different statistics, and they have different legal basis for resettlement. Different laws regulate them. If we talk about those who can't come back to the motherland, it's a special category. 3,000 people in 2024 received the right to go back. 1.8 thousand of them are already in Moscow. They can live in any region, including Moscow and St. Petersburg. We're not talking about labor migration. We're not talking about refugees and political migrants. We're talking only about these categories, patrons and compatriots. They participate in the program of the resettlement of compatriots. Why the leading Western newspapers don't publish this information? Because they debunk the myth about the barbaric Russia. Everyone who wants come to us, those who want they leave, those who want they come back. But amid all this, we receive people from various countries. I gave you figures. But why they do so? Everyone has their own reasons. Sometimes they feel closeness to the history of the country. Sometimes they care about future and prospects. Some people want to develop business that has no future in their own countries. Some come to preserve their identity because they don't want their children to be called it or quadrobus. Some come for their own reasons and ideas. Probably they have dreamt about it for all their life, or they see their lives in the countries of the collective West, for example. We don't see anything to lure them here. We don't show them beautiful pictures. We just answer the demands. We even introduce new categories to the program. Those who are not repatriants or compatriots, they are citizens of their own countries, but they want to preserve their religion, faith, or traditional values. Now we have this category as well, and our government structures and public organizations deal with that. For example, Maria Butina, an MP, makes a lot of effort on this track. It appeared in the recent years. This data is available on the websites of our official ministries and public organizations, and all the links will be available in the text of the briefings. The Western journalists are not going to search for these figures. They are afraid of this truth, and they are not paid for this truth. They are paid for something else, and they are looking for something else. Now we know how it's called and how much money this brings. The US aid provided millions of dollars to pay for the so-called strategic silence. That's why you're terrified by the situation in the Western media. Until the EU is stuck in a Russophobe narrative, Russia goes forward. We're open to everyone who comes here on the legitimate basis, who comes here to create with respect to our country. We historically open to all of them. Alexander Nevsky said that. Thanks to you, thanks to everyone, I think that we're going to continue our conversation, but I cannot but think about the upcoming great holiday, the Victory Day, our common historic victory. With every day, it's getting closer, and it's entering our hearts. We'll talk about it in greater detail, but every day we live in the run-up of this great holiday, the 18th anniversary of the victory. I congratulate you all on the holidays. Thank you. Goodbye.